Hi guys and welcome back to the Mighty Blues. It is the game preview, Everton versus Leeds United. Apologies for the delay, I was caught up in conversation, so that's why we were supposed to go live an hour ago and we didn't, but it is what it is. 10 o'clock, this is the time we done a stream the other night I think, and everybody seemed to be on board with it, so we're back, another game of football for Everton, which I'm sure we're all excited about. And especially after Monday night's thrilling Merseyside derby. No, but in all seriousness, this is another extremely important game of football in the context of our season. We all sat here a couple of weeks ago when Sean Dyche was introduced to us as the new Everton manager and spoke about the importance of the fixtures that followed the Merseyside derby and how, the games against Arsenal and Liverpool were effectively free hits, if you want to call them that. Obviously, we didn't expect to get anything out of either of them. We ended up taking 3 points out of both games, which is better than expected. But we all sort of looked upon the following 5 games as the games that ultimately were and may well be the difference maker, the decider as to whether or not we stay in the Premier League. And that starts tomorrow afternoon against Leeds United, a Leeds United team who've had a really poor season so far, currently sitting 17th in the Premier League, just 1 point above Everton. Likewise, with Everton 4 wins, they've got 1 more draw than Everton and 1 less loss. So as I say, they sit a point above Everton. If we were to win, we'd actually climb to 16th above West Ham as well, dependent on their results, and of course above Leeds United. So it would take us out of the relegation zone, which I suppose, although we are still a long way away from the end of the season, having that sort of mental advantage of being out of that relegation zone, and especially knowing that the team you've beaten has dropped into the relegation zone is I think a massive sort of motivator for those players and the manager tomorrow, because ultimately, although the result tomorrow doesn't solidify anything, and we could win tomorrow and still end up going down, dependent on what results are in the coming weeks and months. But if we are to win tomorrow, as I said, climb out the relegation zone, put Leeds into it, it's just a little bit of a motivator for the following game. So this one is massive, and to be honest with you, I'm sick of sitting here and saying this game's massive, that game's massive, this game's a must-win, that game's a must-win. Sean Dyche said it himself in his press conference yesterday. He said, you're playing in the Premier League, every game's a must-win. And he's absolutely spot on. There isn't, a game that Everton will play, especially between now and the end of the season, that we'll sit here and say isn't a must-win. And again, I don't want to fall into the sort of trap of constantly repeating myself and sounding like a bit of a parrot, but this game is huge. It really is, and it's huge for similar reasons as to the game against Southampton being huge a couple of weeks ago. Similar reasons to the game against West Ham United being huge. Similar reasons to the game against Wolves being huge. It's another game of football at Goodison Park, specifically against a team that are in and around our position at the moment and will likely finish the season in and around where we are. Leeds, very similarly to Everton, were in a similar position last season in terms of a relegation battle, managed to stay up on the last day of the season. Everton obviously staying up on the penultimate day. Again, similar situation to Everton, recently sacked their manager, Jesse Marsh, who they brought in last January to save them, same way we did with Frank Lampard. Obviously, they've now been taken over by Michael Skubala, who's of course the caretaker manager for their upcoming games, whilst they try and find a replacement for Jesse Marsh. And yeah, it's as must win as they come, really. Again, we've lost far too many of these games in the past month, 2 months or so. Far too many games against sides that are in and around our position, in and around our area of the table, who have then obviously taken an advantage on us, like the likes of Southampton, West Ham, Wolves, Leicester, even before the World Cup break. Every time we seem to come up against one of these teams, especially at Goodison Park, we just can't seem to put a performance in. We can't seem to get the result. We can't seem to turn up. We just fault. And if you look at our record over the last 4 or 5 months, we've taken 4 points since October, and 1 was against Manchester City away from home, which was unheard of on New Year's Eve, and 1 was against Arsenal, who were flying on top of the league at the time. So it's games like this tomorrow that have been, our Achilles heel and our kryptonite, if you like. recently, and it's about time that changes. I don't think many of us are particularly heartbroken about Monday's defeat. Of course, we're a little bit annoyed and upset, and we have to deal with the other lot going at us for 4 or 5 days or whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, we all knew going into that Merseyside derby that it was going to be a thankless task for the manager, and I don't think many people put a lot of blame on the manager for that performance or result. Whereas tomorrow is really, for me, where we find out why Sean Dyche is being given the Everton job, and ultimately if Sean Dyche is able to turn this team around, because he's had 2 very difficult fixtures so far. Arsenal at home, granted we won, of course, which was great, and Liverpool away, which again an extremely difficult fixture. You do sort of look and you think, well, if Sean Dyche had been in charge when we played Southampton at home, would we have won that game? Potentially. If we'd have been in charge when we played Leicester at home or Wolves at home, would we have won them games? Again, if buts and maybes, and that those questions will never be answered. But he gets the chance to sort of prove that point a little bit tomorrow against a team that are in a very similar and seemingly perilous position like ourselves in Leeds United. I mean, you look at their recent form, they were beaten by Manchester United last Sunday 2-0 at Ellen Road. They'd drawn with Manchester United 2-2 in the midweek. Of course, at Old Trafford, 2 back-to-back games against Manchester United, which is a bit mad. They'd lost to Nottingham Forest away from home, of course, as I mentioned, the week before, beating Accrington Stanley in the FA Cup, drawn with Brentford, and of course lost to Aston Villa as well, with a couple of FA Cup third round games in between there as well. So, like I said, not in a very good position whatsoever, and very similar to Everton, really, in a big club, because that's what Leeds United are, a big club, historical club, who are struggling, and really, really, really struggling at the moment, and again about to be involved in their second consecutive relegation battle. And the odds of both Everton and Leeds United surviving again this season are very, 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 very slim. I suppose the massive advantage for Everton going into tomorrow is not only the fact that it's at Goodison Park, and I think the games at Goodison Park between now and the end of the season will be the difference maker as to Everton staying up or not, as in exactly the same manner as it was last season. I don't expect an awful lot away from home. That's not me saying I don't think we'll win a game or we'll get points away from home, but I don't expect an awful lot. It's those games at Goodison that I expect us to turn up, battle, put a performance in, the crowd to be up for it. I'm sure the crowd will be up for it again tomorrow. So that's obviously one massive advantage, and another massive advantage is that Everton have employed a manager who is very particular, very experienced in this league, and experienced in working with players that maybe are of a certain level and getting the absolute most out of them, whereas Leeds United at the moment have got a caretaker manager who's inexperienced and almost the opposite of what Sean Dyche is. And that's not me saying that guarantees a result tomorrow, because it doesn't, but it certainly, puts the advantage in our hands, and we have to take advantage of that advantage. That sounds a bit mad to say, but we do. We ultimately cannot leave Goodison Park tomorrow evening with anything less than 3 points. I think every single one of us will be absolutely fuming, upset, raging, whatever word you want to say, if we are to leave Goodison Park without a win tomorrow, because it's massive, and it's these are the types of games that you need to win. They really are, and these are the types of games that if you win, the games against Arsenal and your Liverpools and teams like that become not less important, because every game's important and every game's a must win, etc. But there's less pressure on them. So there wasn't any real pressure on the Arsenal game, because it was Sean Dyche's first game and nobody expected anything. We got a win out of it, great. There wasn't any real pressure on the derby, similar reason. We didn't get a result out of it, we move on. There's a lot of pressure on tomorrow, and I said it a couple of weeks ago when Dyche was announced. I'd have rather his first game have been Arsenal at home than Leeds at home, because we all knew this Leeds game was humongous. Absolutely humongous. The Arsenal game, nobody had any expectations. We went in, we backed the team, we got behind them, and we thought, we'll see what happens, and we won the game. Tomorrow, there will be a lot of Evertonians going to Goodison Park nervous. There'll be a lot of Evertonians going to Goodison Park a little bit apprehensive, because we all know how important a 3 points could be against a team that are in and around a similar position to us. And equally as well, and on the other hand, you look at it sort of the other way round, and if Leeds are to win tomorrow, they're currently sitting 1 point and 1 place above us in the Premier League on 19 points. If they win tomorrow, they go to 22 points. That's 4 points ahead of Everton. That would leave a 2-point gap between Everton and West Ham. If West Ham win, that's a 5-point gap between Everton and West Ham. So Everton are then 4 points off getting out of the relegation zone, which is, again, I get we're only in February and there's still a lot of football to be played, etc., etc. But 4 points adrift is not where you want to be. Not where you want to be. So this is massive. It really, really is massive. And we've got to perform tomorrow. These players have got to turn up and put a performance in. Not, none of this sort of what we saw against Southampton of feeling sorry for themselves, or what we saw against Wolves of just being completely tactically naive, which I don't think we will see because obviously they were under a different manager. But we simply need to turn up and we need to win tomorrow, and we definitely can do that. Will we do that is a different question. But it's absolutely huge. I mean, Leeds have got some really talented young players who ultimately have got every chance of hitting Everton tomorrow. Obviously, the young lad, I can't pronounce his name, so I'm not going to try and pronounce his name, but his first name's Wilfred. He's on fire at the moment. Scored an unbelievable goal in the FA Cup a couple of weeks ago. Absolute beaut of a finish. Goalkeeper probably could have done a little bit better, but absolute beaut of a finish. Again, full of confidence, scoring goals, working hard, moving the ball around. Obviously, Brennan Allinson as well, who again has had a up and down season, but is definitely somebody that will press and will press with stamina and with pace and potentially put Everton's centre half under a little bit of pressure. Obviously, we know they've got the likes of Rodrigo, Tyler Adams, Somerville. He brought Weston McKennie in on loan in the January transfer window as well. Players that are capable of putting performances in that could potentially, hurt Everton if we aren't absolutely at the races tomorrow. But for me, Nonto is how it's pronounced, says the Blues. I didn't want to cock it up because it could sound very similar to something else that I wouldn't want to say on the internet. But as I said, I'm not really too worried about Leeds United tomorrow. I'm not really too worried about what the talent that they've got, or the players that they've got, or the impact of Weston McKennie, or the impact of, as I said, the young lad up top. Or I'm not really worried about that, because in my eyes, if Everton turn up tomorrow and perform as they did against Arsenal a couple of weeks ago, we will win this game, and I think we will win it comfortably. Frank Lampard's Everton team managed to wipe the floor with, granted, Marcelo Bielsa's Leeds team, but that was one of, if not the most comfortable victories under Frank Lampard, and we all know Frank Lampard was a very, very, very limited manager tactically, and this is a similar Leeds team that turned up at Goodison Park and absolutely had the floor wiped with them. So if Everton perform to the best of their capabilities tomorrow, i.e. that performance against Arsenal, then I think we will win this game, and I don't really see any other outcome. But the flip side of that is if Everton turn up and perform like we did against Southampton, or even as most recently Liverpool on Monday night, then there's every chance Leeds United can win this game, and that would just be, as I said, it would be the end of the world if that happens. So I'm not really worried about the talent Leeds possess. I'm not really worried about their manager. I'm not really worried about any of this. What I'm worried about two things. I'm worried about Everton's performance and which Everton will turn up, and I'm worried about what the manager will do up front and what option the manager will go for up front, because ultimately, with no Dominic Calvert-Lewin available, I think Ellis Sims showed in the Merseyside derby that he's not ready, or maybe just not good enough. I had a lot of people, I think I accidentally said he was 18 or something like that. He's 22 years old, so I understand when a lot of people are saying it's nothing to do with him not being ready. He's just not good enough. He's at an age now, and you're right, he's at an age now where he should be, a sort of, I don't want to say an experienced Premier League forward, but certainly an established Premier League striker. If he's going to be an established goal scorer in this league, by 22 years old, you should be there or thereabouts. I'm not saying you should be the finished article or the final article, but you certainly should be there or thereabouts, and he's very clearly isn't there or thereabout yet. So maybe he never will be good enough. Maybe I'm not really asked if Ellis Sims will be good enough in 5 years or 10 years. The point is we're in a relegation zone today, and he isn't good enough today. So does the manager persist with him and maybe give him the benefit of the doubt that, it was a Merseyside derby at Anfield and we were a little bit under the cosh? Maybe does he give him another chance against Leeds at home, who were a fighting team, who again defensively aren't very good at the moment? Does he go with Neil Maupay, who again isn't in particularly good form and hasn't been in particularly good form all season and hasn't really ever played in an Everton team under Frank Lampard. And, okay, Sean Dyche has only been here for a couple of weeks, so it'll be a bit unfair, but never really played in an Everton side that have tactically been set up to suit him and his playing style and his ability as a forward. And other than that, there's not really any other option unless you want to shoehorn Damari Gray in there, unless you want to shoehorn... There's no other real option for Everton to go for tomorrow. And I think the team news conversation is a really, really, really important one. Sean Dyche is obviously very early on into his job, so he doesn't know these players particularly well. He hasn't spent an awful lot of time with them. He probably doesn't know their best positions or where they can or can't play. He'll know a rough idea, but obviously he hasn't seen it firsthand. Whereas I can sit here now as an Evertonian and think, for me tomorrow, Vitaly Mykolenko doesn't start. Firstly, Ben Godfrey plays at left back and Seamus Coleman doesn't start. Mason Holgate plays at right back. But I can say that because I sat and watched Carlo Ancelotti play 4 Everton centre-halves and, be absolutely unbelievable for a number of weeks. That doesn't mean that would be the case again now, but my point is can I realistically see Sean Dyche going with that? If I'm being honest, no, I can't. But that's what needs to happen, in my opinion, because Vitaly Mykolenko has been woeful recently and he needs taken out of that limelight. Same with Seamus Coleman. I personally would change Connor Cody and maybe put Yerry Mina in there next to James Tarkowski. Is that likely to happen? I don't know. So the team news conversation is interesting because there's changes that could be made, but will they be made is a completely different question. Obviously, the big burning problem is that forward, and it is that forward. And whatever you want to say about Dominic Calvert-Lewin, whether you like him, whether you don't like him, whether you think he's a waste of time or whatever you want to think about Dominic Calvert-Lewin, his performance against Arsenal was very, very, very good. He missed a couple of chances that, on another day you would expect him to score, but his overall performance, putting himself about, making himself a nuisance, pissing those centre-halves off, just being a big physical presence, a big, tall bastard up top that you can lump the ball up to and he's going to cause a disturbance. He's going to have people thinking, we'll have to watch him because he's a threat. Ellis Sims is a 22-year-old kid who doesn't bring that at all, and Neil Maupay, again, I like the lad and he's got grit and he's got fight, but he's about 3'6", so he doesn't bring any real big physical presence or threat either. So without changing the team to suit Neil Maupay, he's a disaster in that same system as you would play Dominic Calvert-Lewin in. I get that Ellis Sims is slightly more similar to Dominic Calvert-Lewin in the sense of his height and his physical presence, but he's not anywhere near as much of a handful as Dom. So that's where my worry is. My worry is tomorrow is I'm not particularly worried about Leeds United, and as I said, I think if you were to guarantee me now Everton perform the way they did against Arsenal, I'd go and put me house on us winning this game of football tomorrow. Me worry is, where do our goals come from tomorrow? Who do I look at? Are we again looking at another game where we're going to be relying on a corner and maybe Mina getting on the end of it, or maybe, I don't know, Tarkowski? Are we relying on Iwobi to maybe score a worldie? Are we relying on Damari Gray to pick one out of nowhere? What are we relying on? You look at Leeds' team and they could, as I said, they've got, the young lad on top form. Brendan Allinson's a threat. They've got threats everywhere, goal scoring threats everywhere. Okay, they haven't played particularly well recently, but they're there. You look at Everton and I just don't see a real goal scoring threat. And okay, the performance against Arsenal was absolutely unbelievable. But the goal come from a corner. And the goal may well come from a corner tomorrow. And I remember sitting here before Palace this season thinking, where's Everton's goal threat? And then we ripped Palace to bits 3-0. So if the performance is there and we can ultimately put the pressure on Leeds United and make them feel it and make them feel the atmosphere and make Goodison an absolute bear pit again, then maybe this Leeds United team will just completely check out, and maybe players like Dwight McNeil or Alex Iwobi will start to shine a little bit more. I don't know, but I just look and I think where, realistically, where does the goals come from in this team? And that's why, it's not the only reason why, but it's one of the big reasons why I still don't understand why this board are still in their position, because they have literally ruined this football club over the last 5 or 6 years. But that January transfer window is criminal. It is absolutely criminal. You would not find another business on this planet, in any other sector, whatever the sector may be, you wouldn't find another business that would fail that badly and the people will still kept their jobs. They'd be laughed out the door. They'd be told to pack their bags, bounce, never come back, and go and work in another sector or somewhere. Go and do something else because you're not very good at this. And these absolute criminals are still in charge. They won't be there tomorrow because they don't go to their own games. And rightly so as well. They should never fucking turn up at Goodison Park ever again. But look at the position they've put us in. Look at the position they've put Sean Dyche in. A perilous position where he's looking at his striking options. He's got one lad he can, has got to cross his fingers and hope keeps his fitness. And we know he's completely unreliable and is now out for however long. He's got a 22-year-old lad who's got no Premier League experience and clearly isn't good enough. And he's got another striker who couldn't be further from Dominic Calvert-Lewin if you tried. And I do not understand the recruitment process in the summer surrounding Neil Mowbray, especially. I remember when Neil Mowbray signed, I sat here on the channel and said, this is a good thing because what this means is that there will be a plan B. What this means is that Neil Mowbray is that different to Dominic Calvert-Lewin that there will have to be another option. We wouldn't be signing Neil Mowbray if the management or the director of football or whoever it is didn't have a different style or a different system for him to fit into. So I sat here and said, this is a good thing because this means that Everton will have a plan A and a plan B. And we didn't. It was just plan A and then try and fit Neil Mowbray into plan A, which is baffling for me because if you give me a list of every striker on the planet and you said, pick one that is similar to Dominic Calvert-Lewin and that you think would be able to step in and do the job Dominic Calvert-Lewin does if Dom's not there for whatever reason. Neil Mowbray, out of the thousands of strikers on the planet, Neil Mowbray would probably be in the last 5 I would pick because he couldn't be any further from Dominic Calvert-Lewin if he's had. That's not me saying he's an awful striker or he's not useful or he's not an asset, but he's not an asset in that system at all. You may as well put Dave, who sits in row P in the Gladys Street in GT4. You may as well put him there. Because he's not an asset at all in that system. Different system, maybe, but we never saw a different system under Frank Lampard, and who knows whether we'll see a different system under Sean Dyche. Maybe, because Sean Dyche is a bit more experienced, he'll realise that, and he'll think, actually, if I'm going to use Neil Mowbray, I've got to change it around to try and suit Neil Mowbray. Maybe we'll see that. But that's ultimately where my worry comes from. Anyway, let's jump into the comments before we go into the predicted starting 11. Johnny says Mina would be better up front than Sims. Yeah, again, I said that a couple of weeks ago about putting Michael Keane up front, and whilst it was steeped in humour, there was an element of seriousness behind it when I said it, because I genuinely do think, and you might laugh at me for this and sound, but I genuinely do think Michael Keane is a better finisher than Neil Mowbray and than Ellis Sims. I think him with the ball at his feet is more capable of putting it in the back of the net than either of our two current striking options. And that's not me saying we should put Michael Keane up front. I'm just flirting about with the idea. But the reality is same, similar to when we talk about Ben Godfrey being at left back or Mason Holgate being at right back or whoever it may be. How likely is it that a new manager is going to come in and make them decisions? The Cody Firmino one is more simple because it's a centre-half for a centre-half, an out-of-form centre-half for a lad that, when fit, is very good. But to put a centre-half at left-back in your opening couple of games as a manager, how likely is that to happen? Jungle says, Johnny, we would get laughed out the league. I have to deal with cop-outs every day. Bob says, not even a must-not-lose anymore, must win all these games. These games are... we said, didn't we, as I mentioned, we looked at the 5 games that followed the Merseyside derby, and I said, barring Arsenal away because it got moved, and again, the 6 games taking away Arsenal away, I said I'd take 10 points out of 12, and Leeds at home was one of the games that I looked at and went, that's got to be a win. Jacob says, if we never spent in January, does that mean we're saving for big money striking in the summer? Probably not, mate. David says, where is Townsend? I haven't got a fucking clue, probably in the Royal. Johnny says, I agree, think Keane Mina would cause issues up top, but big physical players, ultimately, and again, they mightn't be strikers, but big physical players that could put themselves about, because our striker isn't that. Goodison Blue says, didn't we do that for a while with Steve Watson? Loads of teams have done it, and I'm not saying we should, and I'm not sitting here saying play Michael Keane up front tomorrow, but when you need a goal and you've got 20 minutes to go, and Neil Mowbray's not doing nothing, and Ellis Sims very clearly isn't good enough, you do what you can to get something out of the game, ultimately. I am Lucas says, your TikTok's a class cam. That's not me, that's someone else. David says DCL without issues is a good player. He is, but he's never going to be without his issues ultimately at the moment. And I personally, I said it a couple of months ago and I'll say it again. For me, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, I don't think his time at Everton is done. I think that's a bit harsh. I think that's the time of Everton being reliant on Dominic Calvert-Lewin is done. I think the club is stupid anyway for relying on him in the summer. They're even more stupid for relying on him in January. But for me now, we have to move on from Dominic Calvert-Lewin. We have to go out and we have to pretend that Dominic Calvert-Lewin doesn't play for Everton. And we have to go out and we have to buy a striker that we look at and we don't think he's going to be a backup to Dom. And we don't think he's not as good as Dom, but we need to go out in the market for a striker that is our new number 9. And then if Dominic Calvert-Lewin gets his way back to fitness and, works his way through his injuries and ultimately gets over all of them and gets back to form, then boss, we've got two decent strikers there. But it takes all the pressure off Dom and it doesn't put us in this situation ultimately. Anyway, let's get into my predicted starting 11 then, because it's 10:30 and I want to watch a film. As I said, really difficult to predict this one because what I would do is completely different to what I think Sean Dyche will do, but we'll talk about that. In goal, I'm going for Jordan Pickford. Probably could have done a little bit better for one of the goals in the Merseyside derby. Maybe I'm being a little bit harsh saying that, but there's very little point in sitting here and debating it because he's going to be in goal tomorrow, isn't he? Let's be honest, he's number 1. Left back, I would go with Ben Godfrey. However, I think he will go with Vitaly Mykolenko. Again, I can't sit here and reason as to why I think Vitaly Mykolenko should be in the team because I really don't think he should be. He ultimately isn't in good form at the moment. He doesn't offer anything going forward. Defensively, he's poor at the minute. I just don't think he should be in the team. I'd put Ben Godfrey in there. At the very least, Ben Godfrey's got pace. At least Ben Godfrey can recover. At least if, he needs to chase somebody down or he needs to be on somebody's toes, at least he can do that. But I think it's very unlikely to happen. I think it'll be Mykolenko. Centre-backs, I would have Tarkowski and Mina. I think Connor Cody's had a rough couple of weeks, little bit of a drop in form. I don't think it should be a case of he comes out the team now and doesn't get back in the team because, let's be honest, Mina, similarly to Dominic Calvert-Lewin, will probably play 20 minutes and then, get stretched off. But I do think to have a player as good as Yerry Mina on the bench, fit and not playing, is probably a little bit silly when you're conceding goals the way we're conceding goals. However, I think you'd probably go with Cody and Tarkowski again. Right back, similarly to Mykolenko, I'd have personally Holgate there, but I think it will be Coleman there for similar reasons. Nathan Patterson played today for the under-21s, for those that are wondering. So obviously very unlikely to be involved tomorrow, but good to see him back in the on the pitch playing some football. Midfield, I am going to go with that midfield 3 of Doucouré, Onana and Garner again, just because I think it worked really well against Arsenal. It didn't work quite as well against Liverpool, but maybe that's the blueprint of a midfield that is going to work at Goodison Park. Maybe that's a midfield that we're going to look at and think, you know what, when we're at home and when the crowd are behind them and when they've got an idea and an identity and a specific way of playing, maybe they will work. I just don't look at anybody else and think who could get in there. James Garner, similarly to Nathan Patterson, has played today for the under-21s, but obviously is very unlikely to have any involvement tomorrow. Somebody asked me in the comments earlier, would I have Tom Davies over there for Doucouré? No, I wouldn't. So ultimately, there's no real other option because we haven't got the wide options to bring Iwobi back. All we've got to hope is that midfield 3 can put in a performance that they did against Arsenal. And then front 3, I'm going to go with Iwobi one side, Gray the other, and do you know what? I'm going to go with Ellis Sims up front because I just don't think the Blues says surely you don't want to see a lone striker again. Cameron only worked against Arsenal because we had Dom. I don't want to see a lone striker again, but I think we will see a lone striker again. This is what I'm saying. If it was my team, it'd be Godfrey at left back, Holgate at right back. I'd have both Sims and Mopé up front, and I'd cut one of the midfielders out, and I'd have 4 across the midfield. I'd go full Sean Dyche 4-4-2. I would, but I'm not sure he will. I think he'll go with the same formation. And I think it'll be Sims up front again, because I just don't think in that system Neil Maupay offers us anything. And don't get me wrong, I don't think Ellis Sims offers us much, but maybe giving him the benefit of the doubt that it was a Merseyside derby at Anfield, really difficult fixture to have an impact on. Maybe Leeds United at home, in a game like tomorrow will be more suited to him. I don't know, but I'd rather see the pair of them up there, but I don't think we will. So there you go. That is my predicted starting 11. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you're watching live, let us know your thoughts. But yeah, listen, ultimately this is an extremely important game. A game that Everton simply have got to win, and I am sick of saying that, because this is something that I say every week pretty much. I feel like I could have just re-uploaded the preview from the Southampton game and just edited the name Leeds over Southampton. But yeah, I can't really sit here and fathom and put into words how important this game is tomorrow. I just hope I'm sitting here tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock doing the instant match reaction with a smile on my face and saying, thank fuck we beat one of the teams that are in and around us. Because as I said, it's very simple, very, very, very simple. We win tomorrow, we're out the relegation zone. We're only out of it by a couple of points, but we put Leeds in it, and mentally that does a lot. And when you look at the table on Monday morning, that does a lot. We lose tomorrow and we are minimum 4 points away from the relegation zone. 3 points away from getting out of the 4 points away from getting out of the relegation zone, which has the complete adverse effect on Monday morning when you look at the table. So a point does nothing for anyone, certainly not for Everton. So for me, it's win or bust tomorrow, and hopefully that is what we see. But yeah, we're gonna leave it there. If you have enjoyed it, please leave a like. If you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. Massive thank you to everybody for watching in the live comments. I really appreciate it. If you're watching the YouTube video, leave your thoughts down below. As I said, we'll be back tomorrow with the instant match reaction and the player ratings, regardless of the result and performance. We'll be here. Obviously, last week it was a little bit late because I was flying home from Amsterdam, but I'm not flying home from Amsterdam this week, so you'll see me tomorrow evening. If you are new, as I said, don't forget to subscribe. Big thank you all for watching, and all we can do is hope that Everton turn up tomorrow. I think there's a protest before the game, so if you're interested in learning more about that, go over on our Twitter and have a little look at it. I'm going to try and get down and get involved in that as well. But yeah, big thanks for watching. Leave a like if you've enjoyed it, subscribe if you're new. Up the fucking toffees, and I'll see you later.